Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and welcome to the show, y'all. Today I'm going to tell you a story about this guy named Jerome. Now, Jerome was a full-fledged alcoholic by the time he was 13. And he became an alcoholic because his mother and father, they ended up getting a divorce because his father was cheating on his mother. In fact, he was seeing a woman that already had 2 kids, and he ended up moving out and moving in with her. And this kind of destroyed the image, the world that Jerome had been living in. He was happy that his mother and father were together. They both worked, gainfully employed, and he had everything that you would ever want. All the material things, plus he had both of his parents in the house. And when that was shattered because of what his father was doing, it caused him to spiral out of control. And he started to drink heavily, just so he could numb himself from it, because he blamed himself. He didn't understand what was wrong. He said, why would my father leave us and go to another woman that had kids when he had a son at home? It made him feel as though his father was rejecting him. So he found peace in the bottle. At least that's what he thought at first, until he became addicted. He knew it wasn't working, but he couldn't stop at that point. So from 13 years old up to 15, he was a heavy drinker. And his mother knew it, but she had her own problems to deal with, and she would say something to him about it, but he continued to drink. She didn't know what to do. She had no idea of how to stop it. She just hoped that he would grow out of it. But he grew more into it. And he became, like I say, more addicted than, most grown people do. He drank in the morning, he drank at night, and throughout the day, he just was a wreck. But he met this girl, when he was 15, he met this girl named Tasha. And Tasha, she had some experience with that because both of her parents were alcoholics. And she told him if he wanted to be her boyfriend, he would have to quit drinking. And at first it worked. For a couple of years it worked. And they would be around each other every day. Every day. Jerome's mother was crazy about Tasha. She spent most of her time over her because she didn't want to be at home with her alcoholic parents. She felt like she had found peace with Jerome and his mother at their house. So when they turned 17, they were seniors in high school, right? And about midway through the school year, Tasha had to come clean about something that she had known for a few months now. And that is that she's pregnant. She's pregnant. And she didn't want to say anything because she was afraid that Jerome might reject her and his mother might put her out and she had nowhere to go. But when she started to show, she had to tell the truth. And when she told them what was happening, that she was pregnant, of course, Jerome was happy. And his mother was happy, but she was concerned. Because she was like, okay, both of y'all are 17 years old. What are you going to do? So she sat them down and she told them the hard truths. That they were going to have to get jobs. And she was going to do everything that she could in the meantime, in between time, until they finished school. She wanted them both to keep going to school. And she told Tasha she was going to have to tell her parents. Because she was 17 years old. She was 17 years old. So when she went to tell her parents, Jerome went with her, and they told her to get her stuff and get out. And that crushed her. So Jerome helped her get her things, and they went back to Jerome's mother's house. And she welcomed her in, like her own daughter. And she told them, look, you've already been having sex, so I'm not going to make you sleep on the couch. One of y'all sleep on the couch, the other had a bedroom. She said, but what I am going to do, you're going to have to be responsible around here. She said, you're going to have to continue to go to school and do all those things. You're going to have chores. You're going to have to clean up. You're going to do this and do that. She tried to get them used to a routine of working because she knew what they were in store for. And it worked. It worked. But a few months before the graduation and the time that Tasha was supposed to have the baby, Jerome fell off the wagon. he started to think about all the pressures that were mounting for him about being a father at the age of 17, about to turn 18, graduating high school, and having to get a job immediately to take care of himself, Tasha, and their baby. So he started to drink. And Tasha seen it. She saw the signs. And she would tell him, look, you got to stop. And eventually his mother found out, and it tore her apart. She said, you have to stop. You have too much going on. And that only added to the pressure for Jerome. So one night, Jerome just needed to let off some steam. And he went out drinking. And when he went out drinking, he got into a fight. And he got beat up pretty bad. And he ended up in the hospital. And Tasha and Jerome's mother, they had to come to the hospital to see about him. And while they were at the hospital seeing about him, Tasha goes into labor because she's so torn up about what's going on with him that she goes into labor. And by them being at the hospital, the nurses got her real quick and everything was fine, and she had their son. And she named him Brandon. And when Jerome saw Brandon, with stitches in his head and all of that, because don't forget, he had gotten into a fight and got beat up pretty bad. He promised to do better. He promised her that he would do better. He promised his mother that he would do better. And he promised his son, Brandon, that he would do better. He promised him that. And for a while it worked. But when Brandon turned 3 years old, something happened. And that something was that his father, Jerome's father, came back around. And it triggered all of these different types of things in him, because he didn't come back around to reconcile and make up and apologize. He didn't want to do that. That wasn't the reason he came around. He came around when Brandon was 3, and Jerome was in his early 20s, because he had grown tired of the situation that he got himself in over here with this other woman with her kids. And now he's coming back trying to creep with Jerome's mother. And Jerome felt disrespected by it. He felt that he was the man of the house now. But at the same time, he wondered, what is his father thinking? What was his mother thinking? Because his mother was so lonely that she let him stay a couple of nights. And him seeing that, he didn't know how to respond. He didn't know how to react. He didn't know what to say. But Tasha knew that he was suffering on the inside from it, because he was angry at his father about the situation. You left us to go here. Now you're leaving them to come back here. And he was mad about that. He was angry about that. And instead of addressing the issue and saying something about it, he turned to the bottle and he started drinking. And once he started, he couldn't stop. It was out of control. And by the time Brandon was 3 years old, Jerome was back on it, bad, real bad, drinking every day. And he was working, but he was drinking every day. And Jerome's mother, she started to recognize what was happening, but she didn't know what to do. And one day they sat down and talked, and Jerome told her, why are you putting yourself in this situation? Why do you want him around? And she sat there, she listened to her son pour his heart out. And she knew that was the reason that he had started drinking again. Because the reason he started drinking initially was because of his father's rejection. And now his father's come back around, and he's only around because he wants to have sex with their mother, his mother. And she knew that he was the problem, and she ended it. She told him that he couldn't come back around. She didn't want to be the other woman. When he had a chance to be the husband that she wanted, the man that she wanted, he turned that down for another woman. And so she told him, you go stay with her. You go wherever you go, but leave this house. and he left. But by now, Jerome is so heavy into alcohol that it's almost impossible to get him to listen. Yeah, he still goes to work, but he's drinking every day because he doesn't know how to deal with the issue of the rejection from his father. He doesn't know how to face it. But Tasha tells him, look, if you don't want to be like him, you're going to have to stop doing what you're doing because you're running. You're not facing your problems. You're not facing your problems. So the years go by and he's still drinking, but they're dealing with it. They're dealing with it because he's still providing. But you know how you got these people that are alcoholics. They go to work and they do their thing and they always, get this business taken care of. They might be late on a bill every now and then, but overall they get the business taken care of because they don't feel like the alcohol is interfering with what they do for a living. And with Jerome, that was true. But when Brandon turned 8 years old, something else happened. Tasha's parents come back around. Tasha's parents come back around, and they're clean and sober. And they tell Tasha that they are sorry for the pain that they caused her and that they want to be a part of her life and a part of their grandchild's life, but only if she wanted that. And Tasha had grown tired. She was appreciative to Jerome's mother for allowing her to stay there and help raise her son, which is her grandson. But she said she didn't want to be in this environment any longer unless Jerome quit drinking. So she issued him an ultimatum. It's either us or the bottle. And Jerome, in his weakness, he was angry. So he told her to get out. And she went back and she stayed with her parents. Now, Jerome knew he was wrong, but he was tired and he was weak and he wasn't in his right mind. And he said something that he knew he was going to regret. And his mother knew that he would eventually regret it, but she understood why Tasha didn't want that. She didn't want that. And she told Tasha, you can come back anytime. And Tasha told her, you can see Brandon anytime. Anytime. You don't even have to call. Because she knew that Jerome's mother loved Brandon. She knew that. So she didn't withhold that. This was between Tasha and Jerome. So now the years are going by. And Jerome, he's paying child support. They didn't have to go to court, but he's giving her money. He's paying, he's still doing what he needs to do, but he won't leave that bottle alone. He won't leave that bottle alone. So one day, Brandon is about 16 and he's a basketball star. Everybody's saying that he's going to college, he's going to do great things, all of this and that, right? And they got this big game coming up. Big game. Big inner city rival. So Jerome, being the proud father that he is, he's been bragging about his son going to play that night. So he goes to the game and he's drunk. He's drunk. And Brandon them, they win the game. And Brandon, he scores about 20-something points, killing it, right? They blew the other team out. When everybody expected it to be close, they blew him out. Brandon had a big game. And everybody was happy. Even his father, Jerome, was happy. But on the way home, Jerome is driving drunk. And you know what happens after that. He's driving down the wrong way on the road and he has a head-on collision with another car. And upon impact, he kills the driver of the other car because he's driving the wrong way. And when the police get to the scene, they have to use the jaws of life to get him out of the car. Get him to the hospital because he's banged up pretty bad. They want to make sure he's okay. But the other passenger in the car is dead on the scene. So Jerome is not aware of how bad it is. But when he gets to the hospital and they wake him up, when he wakes up eventually in the hospital bed, he realizes that he has a handcuff on his arm and a handcuff on one of his ankles. And he's wiggling around, he's trying to move, and he's asking, what's going on? Why am I here? Because he had passed out. He was unconscious when they took him to the hospital. The last thing he remembered was the lights and a loud crash. And Brandon was sitting right there. And Tasha was right there. And his mother was right there. His father was right there. They were all there. And they told him that he had killed somebody. He killed somebody. And he said, no, it's not true. It can't be true. And they all looked at him and they were all crying because they knew that he had been suffering. This alcohol was his peace, but he didn't find peace in it. It was only pain in it. And they knew what was about to happen. So the detectives come in and they started asking questions. They didn't even ask the family to leave because they wanted him to be comfortable. They wanted him to feel like he could tell them what really went on because they already had the results from the alcohol test. The blood test was showing it. He was loaded. He had been over the limit. So when they asked him, how many drinks did you have? He couldn't remember. But he was 10 times over the legal limit to drink. And they told him at that time that he was going to be charged with vehicular homicide for the death of the other person in the other car. He had killed that man, a father, a brother, a son, a grandfather. He had a family that loved him, and now he was gone. And Jerome lay back on the pillow, and he cried, screaming out, no, this is not real, this is not true. But it was. It was true. And Brandon, he sat there beside his dad, and he held his hand, and he told him, Pops, it's going to be okay. And Jerome looked at him. He couldn't speak. And tears rolled down his face. Y'all. And all he could say to Brandon was that I'm sorry. So when they all left the hospital room, they cried. But they knew that they had to be strong for Jerome because what he was facing was prison time. Prison time for a vehicular homicide. So as time went on, he healed up enough to be taken from the hospital to the county jail. And when he got to the county jail, he was booked in and they gave him a bond. And the family came together, including his dad, to make the bond. And they got him out. Now he's awaiting trial on bond. And you're going to have to tune in to the next episode to hear the rest of this story. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all. I've been trying to breathe underwater.